This episode is brought to you by CarterComics.com. It's your one-stop shop for all your comic needs, whether it be graded or raw. Carter Comics has got it all. All you gotta do is go to CarterComics.com, fill your card up with all their amazing comics. Use the discount code FREAKNET, FREAKNET. Save you 10% at checkout. Not only on their website, but also at their eBay account. And the link to eBay can be found on their homepage at CarterComics.com. Again, CarterComics.com is your one-stop shop for all comic needs. Greetings, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of this freaky show. I am your host, Travesty.
And I'm the Freak Joe.
And I know what you're thinking. Hey, wait a minute. It's after October. What do you mean, this freaky show? Well, Freak Joe and I were just having so much fun doing this freaky show. We figured, why not push it off just one more week? You know, give everyone who's been watching our cemetery vlogs an opportunity to enjoy those and then come over here and listen to our podcast, which, by the way, thank you to everyone who's been subscribing to the channel and listening to or watching our cemetery vlogs. We greatly appreciate it. But yeah, we figured we'd extend it one more week, past October, because realistically, it's not like we're celebrating, the month of October. We're celebrating spooky season, and spooky season in your heart could be anytime.
It's true.
Yeah.
The Tumblr folks say it starts in June.
There we go. See, right? Maybe one day when Freaknet Studios becomes its own thriving entity, that freaky season or spooky season for us will be 6 months long. Who knows? We don't know.
Yeah. Right.
Year long. Who knows? Anyway, so on this episode, we're going to be talking about famous vanishing or celebrities who have vanished off the face of this earth. And then, of course, we're going to be wrapping up this episode with another freaky tale from a Freak Joe ourselves. So let's dive in with our first famous vanishing. There we go. I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't know. All these years, still don't know. There we go. Okay. So the first famous vanishing we're going to talk about, our first celebrity who has vanished, is going to be Harold Holt. Freak Joe, what do you know about Harold Holt?
Never heard of him.
Well, Harold Holt is a former Prime Minister of Australia. He vanished while swimming near Portsea, Victoria, in Cheviot Beach, or Cheviot, Sheviot, Cheviot?
Yeah, sure. I don't know.
Cheviot Beach on December 17th, 1967. He was naturally presumed to have died by accidental drowning, though certain skeptics claimed Holt was taken by a Chinese submarine.
Interesting.
Theodosia Burr Alston. What do you know about him, Joe?
Never heard of him either.
Well, she.
Or she, sorry.
No, you're fine. I think I said, what do you know about him? As in, what do you know about him?
Right.
Theodosia Burr Alston was the daughter of the third ever U.S. Vice President Aaron Burr.
Oh, wow.
Who infamously was lost at sea in December of 1812. Theodosia left on December 31st, 1812 on the ship Patriot from Georgetown, South Carolina to New York. The ship and its passengers and crew vanished into thin air.
Fascinating. It was a lot easier to disappear in those days.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially you're talking about a wooden ship that's going onto the ocean. Granted, this is South Carolina to New York, so maybe they follow the coast, but to a certain point, you got to get out into the ocean in order to travel. So it's kind of eventually you're going to be washed away, especially when the current is taking you away. So it's not like nowadays where, these ships have propellers and, they're projecting you into a certain direction. These have sails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
I do remember hearing about Aaron Burr's daughter vanishing. Yeah, I think it's weird though because like, you talk about a president, somebody going missing, and they don't have a conspiracy theory of it. It's just the boat going missing.
Yeah.
Here's one you may not have heard of either, but I'm gonna ask anyways. Amelia Earhart.
Oh, I've heard of Amelia Earhart, of course.
I know.
Yeah, I think they recently decided that she crash landed on an island and was eaten by crabs.
Seriously?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, it. oh, Okay. That you know what? If that's her way of going, that's not the best way. But hey, I mean,
Oh yeah, it'd be awful. It'd be. I mean, if she was dead first, fine.
oh,
You know,
see
whatever. Cycle of life, but
I see
or circle of life.
that's what I can imagine is that like, especially like, well, 1937 is when she vanished. So legendary pilot Amelia Earhart dreamed big when she attempted to become the first woman to circumnavigate the world by plane in 1937. During the longest leg of her flight, her plane, her plane, and the navigator Frederick Noonan went missing. They were declared lost at sea a while after and were never seen again. So, um, I don't know what I was trying to say. It's just it just be like in 1937. I'm assuming like that's the kind of plane that like unless I guess depending on what the problem was, landing that safely would probably be a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, well, certainly
So
without a runway or whatever.
exactly, yeah. So yeah, I mean that's interesting. Yeah, we'll have to talk more about that because I mean I know like even though again it's 1937, you're talking about nearly 100 years ago now. 90 whatever. No, sorry, 87 years ago.
Wow.
Did I get that right?
I don't know.
85 plus years ago.
Yeah.
People still talk about disappearance like this, you know, especially with one that's like Amelia Earhart, who was doing something like this, like traveling. I mean, I'm sure there's still people out there trying to find the Patriot that sunk in 1812, you know?
Right. Yeah. I feel like it's the first big disappearance
Mhm.
after the invention of television.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, you used to get people who talk about like ships going down in the Great Lakes, and they're still finding these old wooden ships in the Great Lakes, you know? So it's, yeah, shipwrecks, plane crashes. I'm sure somewhere out there they're still talking about that Malaysia flight from just like a few years ago that
Oh
just
yeah.
vanished. You know, so
Flight 370 or whatever.
something like that. Yeah.
God, that was
Uh,
in 2014.
See, okay,
Oh,
I was gonna say like 17 or 18.
yeah.
Like it didn't seem it was 10 years ago.
Right.
Um, Michael Rockefeller.
I recognize the Rockefeller name.
So Michael was the son of New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller. He was 23 years old when he went missing back in November of 1961. Rockefellers have spent a lot of time with the native Asmate tribe, ASMAT, if I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I apologize. The native Asmate tribes in New Guinea when he disappeared. Some have speculated that Mike went native. Others say he was eaten by sharks. Um, where is New Guinea? Is that South
Uh,
America?
New Guinea is off the coast of Africa, I believe.
Is that Africa? Okay. Um,
Oh, Australia. Sorry.
Australia. You know what? I mean, you ever seen a movie? What's it called? Out Quigley Down Under.
I've heard of it.
Tom Selleck, Western cowboy, traveled to Australia to get hired by. I can't remember the actor's name, but he played Snape.
Oh, Alan Rickman? No way.
Yes, yeah. Alan Rickman
I'm
played
sure
Snape.
I've seen it, but I don't remember it
It's
like
it's
at all.
it's a very good movie if you're into westerns. It's a very good Alan Rickman villain movie. Very similar to probably MacGruber-esque kind of but
Nice.
yeah, so it is a good movie if you enjoy it. And I mean they talk a lot about like, especially like when it was based back in the day was like how vast Australia was.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
what Australia was back in 1961, I don't know. But I'm guessing it's very similar to like Canada, where I think like 90% of the Canadian population runs along the border of the United States, and everything that's upwards there it's just I mean it's charted, but appears to be like uncharted, just open area. And that's what I kind of see like Australia to be like. A lot of like the major population is along the coast of the waterways, but once you get more central into Australia, it's more like open fields and prairie and all that kind of stuff. And so maybe 1961 going native. I mean, absolutely, it's totally possible. It's
Yeah.
also being eaten by sharks. I think is very possible. So
Yeah.
but
Well, and Australia's waters also have those spider crabs with the 10 feet legs. So it could be
mm,
another person eaten by crabs,
God, yeah, maybe we don't give crabs a lot of notice like we should.
right?
Scott Smith.
Mm-mm.
So okay, so this one's
How have I
fair.
not heard of any of these people? This is driving me nuts.
So this one's fairly new. So after a November 2000 concert in Vancouver, the bassist Scott Smith from Loverboy decided to take a sailboat to Mexico with his fiancee and a friend named Billy Ellis. Ellis later said that they came across a storm while at sea. While he fetched gear downstairs, Smith was swept overboard. Efforts to find his body were proved unsuccessful. So, taking a sailboat from, I guess it looks like from Vancouver to Mexico. Um,
Several thousand miles.
that's Vancouver. I'm guessing is that the east coast of Mexico?
Vancouver, yeah. I think Vancouver's on the west side of Canada.
Is it what? Because I'm assuming west. I would think it was west, but I just wanted to assume east because that would be like the more populated side. But I could be wrong. Again. If it's west, it's more logical why you go down to Mexico because it's on the east coast. And you're talking about going down the east coast of the United States, around Florida, into the Gulf, and which I guess the west coast would I think be more logical because you don't get a lot of hurricanes on the west coast.
Right.
It's more tropical storms, or I think somebody who from California once told me that they don't even that even if something hurricane like hits California, it's not technically called a hurricane over there. It's like a tsunami or whatever.
Oh,
Or
interesting.
it's called something else. Like they don't have hurricanes in California. They're called either like tropical storms or tsunamis or something like that, typhoons or whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah. So traveling on the West Coast, that totally makes 100% sense. It would be unique to kind of see. So, because I mean, you're talking about a guy who was actually on the boat when somebody vanished.
Yeah. No one else
Uh,
vanished from the boat.
exactly. Um, Another well-known Jimmy Hoffa,
Ah, there's someone I finally heard of.
union leader and mafia associate. Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance wasn't necessarily a surprise, but his face remains a mystery to this day. He vanished from a Detroit restaurant parking lot in 1975 on the same day he was gonna meet with mafia bosses. It's widely assumed he was murdered. This one, I think I've seen more documentaries and speculations um, about where his body could be. I know on MythBusters, if anyone doesn't know, it's an incredible old show that's not on anymore, and I wish they would reboot it because it's fantastic. But
Mm-hmm.
people try to bust myths and speculations, and one of them was Jimmy Hoffa being buried at a Giant Stadium in New York. Um,
Oh,
Apparently, there was this huge bump that was kind of like in the field, and they would run these machines over that would show underneath, like underground and stuff. And clearly, obviously, it proved it wasn't him. Or else we probably would have heard about that and all that.
Right.
But that's probably the one that I hear more about even podcasts talking about like how he went missing, what the speculation was on what happened, and one of the biggest ones that were talked about was he was taken away because of certain things that he did as a union leader. So
Fascinating. I always I have no real evidence to prove it.
Yeah.
But I know a guy in Benton County
Mhm.
whose grandfather was in the like in Al Capone's inner circle.
I believe it.
And so there's a part of me that assumes that Hoffa's buried somewhere in Benton County, Indiana. Just because like feels like something that could be possible,
I 100%. Dude,
So
that's the thing too. It's like even though because like they're talking about like what like Detroit. Yes.
uh-huh. That's close enough.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Maybe it was. If it was. Yeah. I mean, it's totally possible. It's totally logical. And um, I think like as people kind of like look at these like more and more, like they kind of branch out from like the expectations of where it could be to the well, maybe it's unlikely, but very possible. You're telling me you can throw somebody in a van and travel into Indiana? Like, come on now, it's possible. Virginia Dare.
Virginia Dare. I've heard the name, but I don't think I know who she was.
So Virginia Dare was the first child born to English parents in the New World.
Oh yeah. All right. Did she
Virginia,
disappear in the Roanoke thing?
I believe so. Well, let's find out. First, maybe. Yeah, I think it is. Virginia Dare was more or less the poster child for American colonialism. When she was a toddler, her grandfather went to secure more money for the settlement. When he returned, Dare and the other 120 settlers have vanished. So, yeah, the Roanoke thing. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I don't know how I didn't put Roanoke in the notes here, but yeah, I must have accidentally missed a line or two. But yeah, Roanoke is probably still one of the biggest like unique things, and I know like a lot of people like. I think the most common thing I heard was that the colony was in need of help, and they traveled to a local Native American tribe for assistance, and they ended up just kind of just staying.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah,
that makes the most sense to me.
yeah. Um, Also, I mean, obviously Roanoke and all that stuff. It was on the East Coast and everything, where weather is a little bit rough and stuff, and being gone for quite some time. It's yeah. I mean, you probably get to a point where you're like, we don't have enough supplies. We need help, and yeah, I think there was a map that kind of showed like where they projected they would have gone. Um, and I don't think they believe like they all made it there, but at least some of them did. And when they did, they kind of well, it's I guess it's um what was the term for the Rockefeller guy? Um, that he went quote unquote native. It's like he probably just acclimated
Oh right.
to a new way of life, which makes a lot of sense. If you're trying to survive, do what you're capable of doing in order to survive and stuff. So, and Roanoke, obviously, and it's unique too because when you show up, especially back in the day, back then, you come back. I mean, how much did they really look? Like how much resources did they really have to look? That
Right.
I'm assuming they're not traveling long distances north, south, east, and west, whatever, to find this colony. They just see everyone's gone, and that's just it. And I think what is it's was it that they found Roanoke or something carved into a tree, or they found a word carved into?
Croatoan, I think.
Okay, yeah. What exactly was that? Like, I never actually. I'm sure I was told what it was, but I never actually remember what that was.
For some reason, I'm looking on the Virginia Dare
Mhm.
Wikipedia page, but I'm not seeing it exactly. But I think, or I thought that Croatoan was like a reference to either the name of the local tribe or like one of the local chiefs or something.
Gotcha. So, and honestly, and that could have been something too. Like maybe a tribe was traveling through the area, noticed they were in despair, and said, "Hey,
Oh, it's the
come
name of
with."
the island nearby. Now it's known as Hatteras
Oh,
Island.
gotcha. Yeah, and so maybe that's what they did. Like maybe they just said, like, "Hey, listen, they noticed, maybe traveling across, some people realize that you have this a group of people who are in despair. Say, hey, come with us, you know, whatever." And they did, and probably at that point, people are like, "Oh no, they're gone. What happened?" Like, well, they must have been, ravaged. It must have been, is whatever. It's like, okay, well, it is what it is now because I mean, you don't have, the FBI and people searching and throwing stuff on social media and hashtag Roanoke and all that stuff. So I think the efforts in searching weren't as vast. So, um, another well-known one, DB Cooper.
Oh yeah, he just like got off a plane or something, right?
Uh, Yeah, getting off a plane is one way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
In 1962, a man calling himself DB Cooper boarded in Portland, Oregon, which he promptly hijacked by claiming he has an explosive. After laying the passengers off the plane in exchange for $200,000 in cash, Cooper had the pilot take off once again before parachuting out and disappearing into the thick forest of Washington.
Right.
So, yeah, he definitely got off the plane. He just happened to do it while in midair.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, this is another probably like well known up there with Hoffa and Amelia Earhart and all that. But I mean, there's always speculation on like, did he survive the flight or the landing? And um,
Right.
I think when I think of DB Cooper, I think of Without a Paddle as one of the big references to DB Cooper. And
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, it's just unique because I also think this was like probably more during the colder weather time too in '62. So, um, I mean, if he made it, he made it. They don't. I mean, to this day, I don't think they really know who he really was. But yeah, he just went by DB Cooper.
Yeah. That's fascinating. He not he, just in general, up until 2001, it was actually like pretty normal to hijack planes. Because like the idea, it's kind of like if you've ever worked retail,
Mm.
um, they tell you like if someone comes to rob the store, just let them.
Oh yeah,
Report it later. It's not worth fighting them. It's not worth losing your life over it or getting hurt or hurting them, and then now we have to deal with the liability of that. It was the same thing with planes. It was just like, if someone tries to hijack a plane, like take them where they want to go and land the plane, and you're not going to hurt anybody, and it'll be fine. It's just a plane hijacking. And then, of course, 2001, it was the first time that someone tried to hijack a plane and then crash it into something. And then
yeah.
now you can't do that anymore. Thanks for ruining it for everybody, Osama.
Right? Like people just wanted to get somewhere, like when there's a destination, it was just more like, okay, let's just do as they say kind of thing.
Yeah.
And um dude, yeah, but it's like I can't remember when it was, and it obviously honestly, it could be longer than I remember it being. But do you remember hearing about a story where like some like guy, like I think he was in his 20s, um just kind of like walked onto a tarmac, stole a plane, and just kind of joyride it? Just went for like he just randomly walked onto a tarmac one day, walked onto a plane, started flying it, and was in conversation with the tower.
Oh
And
yeah.
they're like, "What do you do?" He's like, "I just want to go for a ride, blah blah." I don't think things were going well for him, and I think at the very end of the conversation, he was talking about like he never had the expectation of landing the plane.
That's
So
right.
I think he eventually crash landed it and everything, and
Yeah. I think it
but
was also Seattle.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was out. Yeah, it was out. It was out west. I can't remember if it was Seattle or Oregon or something like that. But he wasn't doing anything because I mean, obviously, everyone thinks like, okay, this dude just took a plane. What's he gonna crash it into? What's he gonna? And yeah, I mean, he just started having a conversation with Tower, and he's talking about how like he's just enjoying life at that very moment because from the perception of what everyone entailed or the perception of what everyone got was down the line while talking with him, he never really enjoyed life that much, and this
Yeah.
was his way of going out. But yeah, I think he found an open field and said, hey, I'm just going to crash here or whatever. And he eventually did. But yeah, it was just unique. Like that happened. And that was like just a random, like, wait, what just happened kind of thing. Like some dude just walked onto a tarmac and got into a plane and just took off with it. And,
Right.
but yeah,
Don't have keys or anything. You
yeah,
just, or you left the keys in there. What the hell?
right. Yeah. So, and like I said, I mean, to me, that was probably like within the last 6 years, but that could be 10 years old too, you know? So it's, anywho, we got two more. Frank Morris.
Mm-mm.
Frank Morris was the architect of the only successful escape from Alcatraz.
Oh, nice. Good for
Frank
him.
Frank Morris disappeared in 1962 after breaking out of the infamous island prison. Morris, who some believe successfully made it to Argentina, was played by Clint Eastwood in the 1972 movie Escape from Alcatraz. And that's unique to me because I've watched the movie Escape to Alcatraz, and I'm a huge fan of Clint Eastwood. It never really dawned on me that that movie was made 10 years after the escape. Like in my mind, it's a historical movie that was made years and decades after.
Right.
The fact that now you just realize, like, oh, they made that movie about something that happened 10 years prior. That's like us making a movie about the pandemic,
Right.
you know, within 4 or 5, 4 years or whatever. It's like, or I don't know, something that happened in 2014, 2015. Who
Right.
knows? But yeah, it's just to me, it's like wow. Like when I watch it, like the early 2000s, it's like wow, okay, cool. So they made it about historic. But I know there were more than just Jack Morris. I believe there were three guys who escaped. And watching the movie was actually pretty cool. Like because I think they followed exactly how they did it, and the fact that they spent like all their time like carving through walls and like crawling through basically Shawshank, crawling through these
Right.
small little areas. But the only difference is obviously with Alcatraz being on an island, they filled like sleeves up like with air in some way, and they created these rafts, and it was wild. Like the rafts out of pants and stuff. It's Escape from Alcatraz with Clint Eastwood is a really good movie. If you ever get a chance to watch it, you want to sit down and have, I don't know, a cup of tea, maybe some coffee or some cider,
Nice.
because it's fall weather, or a bowl of chili, and
Mm-hmm.
curl up with a blankie and enjoy a movie like that. I think that's definitely the route to go is watch Escape from Alcatraz. It's fantastic.
Nice.
The last one we have, and I saved this one for last for a very good reason, is because of this freaky show, this man is well known, and that's Ambrose Bierce.
No, oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Ambrose Bierce, famous for his short stories like An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, Ambrose Bierce made a splash on the literary scene with his sarcastic wit. And that's probably why I'm really drawn to this dude because I'm also quite witty and quite sarcastic.
Yeah.
Bierce moved to Mexico in 1913 on the cusp of a revolution, and that was the last anyone saw of him. It's suspected he died in 1914 siege of Ojinaga.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, we've read, well, not we, you. I'm not going to take credit for something you've done, but we've read several Ambrose Bierce
That's true.
stories. Let's see here. So, we read A Diagnosis of Death, as well as The Damned Thing. We actually read
Mm-hmm.
that one twice.
Hmm.
Um,
I believe it's the one we're reading today.
The Psychological Shipwreck. Is it? No, we're not reading The Damn Thing.
No, psychological shipwreck. I just meant like
Yes,
Ambrose
sorry.
Bierce is who we're reading today. Sorry.
Yes, The Psychological Shipwreck is what we're reading today. The Diagnosis of Death we read, The Damn Thing, and of course we did read The Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. Um, but yeah, it's just to me, when it comes to this freaky show and freaky tales, uh, Ambrose Bierce almost becomes a mainstay with us, and it's like we gotta pull another Ambrose Bierce short story because they're all fantastic. I mean, any story you've been reading, Joe, is absolutely amazing. But the fact that we get to include Ambrose Bierce in so many of our episodes is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So those are famous celebrity vanishings. There are more. So for anyone out there who have one that they've kind of followed or looked into that we didn't mention, share with us. Let us know what your most unique or maybe the most famous one that we didn't talk about. I know there was one I failed to mention. No, actually, never mind. She's not vanishing. Not important. Share with us. Let us know. I'm sure there are other ones out there that we never really covered or talked about on today's episode. But this episode will be closed out as we have been doing. We'll be finishing up our episode with This Freaky Show. So before we dive into that, make sure you are following us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, just by searching This Freaking Show. Obviously, continue to listen to us wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you decide you'd like to watch our episode, you can do so by going to YouTube. Search this Freakin' Studios, and you can find our episodes of This Freaky Show there. So, with all that being said, we appreciate you guys tuning in and listening or watching our episode, and enjoy Freak Joe's next freaky tale.
A Psychological Shipwreck by Ambrose Bierce. In the summer of 1874, I was in Liverpool, whither I had gone on business for the mercantile house of Bronson and Jarrett, New York. I am William Jarrett. My partner was Zenas Bronson. The firm failed last year, and unable to endure the fall from affluence to poverty, he died. Having finished my business and feeling the lassitude and exhaustion incident to its dispatch, I felt that a protracted sea voyage would be both agreeable and beneficial. So instead of embarking for my return on one of the many fine passenger steamers I booked for New York on the sailing vessel Morrow, upon which I had shipped a large and valuable invoice of the goods I had bought. The Morrow was an English ship with, of course, but little accommodation for passengers, of whom there were only myself, a young woman, and her servant, who was a middle-aged negress. I thought it singular that a traveling English girl, should be so attended, but she afterward explained to me that the woman had been left with her family by a man and his wife from South Carolina, both of whom had died on the same day at the house of the young lady's father in Devonshire, a circumstance in itself sufficiently uncommon to remain rather distinctly in my memory, even had it not afterward transpired in conversation with the young lady that the name of the man was William Jarrett, the same as my own. I knew that a branch of my family had settled in South Carolina, but of them and their history, I was ignorant. The Morrow sailed from the mouth of the Mersey on the 15th of June, and for several weeks we had fair breezes and unclouded skies. The skipper, an admirable seaman, but nothing more, favored us with very little of his society except at his table, and the young woman, Miss Jeanette Hartford, and I became very well acquainted. We were, in truth, nearly always together, and being of an introspective turn of mind, I often endeavored to analyze and define the novel feeling with which she inspired me, a secret, subtle but powerful attraction which constantly impelled me to seek her. But the attempt was hopeless. I could only be sure that at least it was not love. Having assured myself of this, and being certain that she was quite as wholehearted, I ventured one evening, I remember it was on the 3rd of July, as we sat on deck to ask her, laughingly, if she could assist me to resolve my psychological doubt. For a moment she was silent, with averted face, and I began to fear I had been extremely rude and indelicate. Then she fixed her eyes gravely on my own. In an instant my mind was dominated by as strange a fancy as ever entered human consciousness. It seemed as if she were looking at me, not with, but through those eyes, from an immeasurable distance behind them, and that a number of other persons, men, women, and children, upon whose faces I caught strangely familiar, evanescent expressions, clustered about her, struggling with gentle eagerness to look at me through the same orbs. Ship, ocean, sky, all had vanished. I was conscious of nothing but the figures in this extraordinary and fantastic scene. Then all at once, darkness fell upon me. and anon from out of it, as to one who grows accustomed by degrees to a dimmer light, my former surroundings of deck and mast and cordage slowly resolved themselves. Miss Hartford had closed her eyes and was leaning back in her chair, apparently asleep, the book she had been reading open in her lap. Impelled by, surely I cannot say what motive, I glanced at the top of the page. It was a copy of that rare and curious work, Denneker's Meditations, and the lady's index finger rested on this passage. To sundry it is given to be drawn away, and to be apart from the body for a season, for as concerning rills which would flow across each other, the weaker is borne along by the stronger. So there be certain of kin, whose paths intersecting, their souls do bear company, the while their bodies go before appointed ways, unknowing, go afore appointed ways unknowing. Miss Hartford arose, shuddering. The sun had slunk below the horizon, but it was not cold. There was not a breath of wind. There were no clouds in the sky, yet not a star was visible. A hurried, tramping sound sounded on the deck. The captain, summoned from below, joined the first officer, who stood looking at the barometer. "Good God!" I heard him exclaim. An hour later, the form of Jeanette Hartford, invisible in the darkness and spray, was torn from my grasp by the cruel vortex of the sinking ship, and I fainted in the cordage of the floating mast to which I had lashed myself. It was by lamplight that I awoke. I lay in a berth amid the familiar surroundings of the stateroom of a steamer. On a couch opposite sat a man, half undressed for bed, reading a book. I recognized the face of my friend Gordon Doyle, whom I had met in Liverpool on the day of my embarkation, when he himself was about to sail on the steamer City of Prague, on which he had urged me to accompany him. After some moments, I now spoke his name. He simply said, "Well," and turned a leaf in his book without removing his eyes from the page. "Doyle," I repeated, "did they save her?" He now deigned to look at me and smiled as if amused. He evidently thought me but half awake. "Her? Whom do you mean?" "Jeanette Hartford." His amusement turned to amazement. He stared at me fixedly, saying nothing. "You will tell me after a while," I continued. "I suppose you will tell me after a while." A moment later I asked, "What ship is this?" Doyle stared again. "The steamer City of Prague, bound from Liverpool to New York 3 weeks out with a broken shaft. Principal passenger Mr. Gordon Doyle, ditto lunatic Mr. William Jarrett. These two distinguished travelers embarked together, but they are about to part, it being the resolute intention of the former to pitch the latter overboard." I sat bolt upright. "Do you mean to say that I have been for 3 weeks a passenger of this steamer?" "Yes, pretty nearly. This is the 3rd of July. "Have I been ill?" "Right as a trivet all the time, and punctual at your meals." "My God! Doyle, there is some mystery here. Do have the goodness to be serious. Was I not rescued from the wreck of the ship Morrow?" Doyle changed color, and approaching me laid his fingers on my wrist. A moment later, "What do you know of Jeanette Hartford?" he asked very calmly. "First, tell me what you know of her." Mr. Doyle gazed at me for some moments as if thinking what to do, then seated himself again on the couch, said, "Why should I not? I am engaged to marry Jeanette Hartford, for whom I met a year ago in London. Her family, one of the wealthiest in Devonshire, cut up rough about it, and we eloped. Are eloping, rather. For on the day that you and I walked to the landing stage to go aboard this steamer, she and her faithful servant passed us, driving to the ship Morrow. She would not consent to go in the same vessel with me, and it had been deemed best that she take a sailing vessel, in order to avoid observation and lessen the risk of detection. I am now alarmed, lest this cursed breaking of our machinery may detain us so long that the Morrow will get to New York before us, and the poor girl will not know where to go." I lay still in my berth, so still I hardly breathed. But the subject was evidently not displeasing to Doyle, and after a short pause he resumed. By the way, she's only an adopted daughter of the Harfords. Her mother was killed at their place by being thrown from a horse while hunting, and her father, mad with grief, made away with himself the same day. No one ever claimed the child, and after a reasonable time they adopted her. She has grown up in the belief that she is their daughter. Doyle, what book are you reading? Oh, it's called Denneker's Meditations. It's a rum lot. Jeanette gave it to me. She happened to have 2 copies. Want to see it? He tossed me the volume, which opened as it fell. On one of the exposed pages was a marked passage. To sundry it is given to be drawn away, and to be apart from the body for a season. For, as concerning rills which would flow across each other, the weaker is borne along by the stronger. So there be certain of kin, whose paths intersecting their souls do bear company, the while their bodies go 4 appointed ways, unknowing. She has a singular taste in reading, I managed to say, mastering my agitation. Yes, and now perhaps you will have the kindness to explain how you knew her name and that of the ship she sailed in. You talked of her in your sleep, I said. A week later, we were towed into the port of New York, but the morrow was never heard from. The end.